Thank you everybody for coming. My name is Kayla Garver. I'm the president of Kappa Delta Pi. Kappa Delta Pi and the School of Education are holding this event today, so super exciting. Thank you for anybody who took time out of your schedule to be here. So the general layout of our schedule is we're going to go ahead and have Dr. Brad Bakel, who is going to interview Allison Smith, and we're going to have the interview be conducted first. Then Dr. Bakel is going to be able to give her some feedback, and then we're going to have the chat open for questions, or you can also raise your hand. If you see on the side, on the participant side, you have like a little hand like this. If you click it, you can raise your hand to be able to ask a question to Dr. Bakel. So first, a little bit about our two interviewees. We have Dr. Brad Bakel, who is, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate you taking the time out. And he is currently the principal of Cedarville Elementary in East Allen County Schools. So he grew up in Fort Wayne, and he actually went to Bishop Dwenger High School. And he has a wife who is a second grade teacher at St. Joseph Central Elementary at Fort Wayne Community Schools. And he has 3 children. His 2 sons are in college right now. One is going to Ball State, and the other one is at Ohio Northern University. And then he has a daughter who has already graduated with her BA from Indiana University and an MA from Michigan State University. And then he then attended Indiana University for his BS and MS in elementary education. He went to Indiana University Bloomington for his EDS in educational administration, and Indiana State University Terre Haute for his PhD in educational administration. And then, of course, he was a classroom teacher at Prairie Heights Community Schools, Fort Wayne Community Schools, and then worked as a principal director of elementary curriculum and assessment and assistant superintendent at East Allen County Schools.
Yeah.
Definitely a big wrap there.
Yeah, I gave you a lot of words there. I apologize for that.
Oh, no, it's great.
2 minutes.
And then we have Allison Smith, who is our recent graduate from PFW. And she went to Northern High School, and she has her elementary education degree right now. And she's going to be a teacher as long as she can remember. That's fantastic. She's been working in an educational setting since high school, working as a latchkey supervisor, elementary school tutor, and substitute teacher. And she's also worked as a teacher assistant during the summer clubhouse program. So she definitely has some potential there, right? So we'll go ahead and let you guys take off with the interview and see how that goes.
Allison, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great. It's nice to meet you and see you kind of live, but not in person.
Right.
I had a chance to look over your resume, and just as a point for you to just relax and get into the mood of all of this, tell me a little bit more about yourself and your purpose for wanting to be a teacher.
Yeah. So, like she said, I have worked with kids since I was in high school. I started out as a latchkey supervisor for the latchkey program at Lancaster Elementary School. And then I ended up, after I graduated, working as a tutor for kindergarten through 5th grade students at Austin Elementary School. I have always wanted to be a teacher. I know that's kind of a very common answer, but ever since I can remember, I've wanted to. My mom was a teacher, and so was my grandpa, so it's kind of in my blood. I've subbed in a lot of different grades in different schools. And yeah, I think when I was in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, I struggled with reading really bad. And I had a vision problem that we didn't find out about until I was quite a bit older. But because of my teachers that I had and some other staff at my elementary school, I was able to get like a pass plus score on my ISEP test. And so, yeah, so it was learning from that and just seeing how quickly I improved in reading and how it completely changed. Having good teachers changed my education. I want to have that impact on kids someday. So that's my goal.
It's great that you had good influences for you, because sometimes it only seems like one person can kind of sour the feeling about teaching and be actually even being a student. The questions that I have, obviously we're short on time. We don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to break them down by certain little categories. And my first one has to do with professional experience. And I want to know what are some of the most significant things that you've learned from your student teaching, cooperating, and from your cooperating teacher? And what did you like and dislike?
Yeah, so I think that I had a really good cooperating teacher and a great school to be learning in. They do great at differentiated learning, and I, learned about it in school, and I had like been working with students on one. I knew a little bit about it, but I learned a lot about reading groups and math centers, making sure that I can reach every student and their specific needs. Um, my cooperating teacher taught me, how to handle working with special needs students. We had several of them in the classroom, and I think I learned a lot from that. I actually worked one-on-one with a lot of them, and even after I stopped student teaching, I still continued doing e-learning with them. So I Zoomed with them 3 times a week, 2 of the special needs students in my classroom. And I learned a lot from that experience as well, just working one-on-one with them. Through a computer is a little harder to reach them, but we made it work. And yeah, so it was a good experience.
It's tougher. Our experienced teachers realize the same thing. It's a little bit harder. Hopefully have some programs in place. Instructionally, you mentioned a little bit about differentiation. And so how did you meet the wide range of kids in a setting that's not ability grouped?
Right. So we did reading groups every day. And so being able to benchmark students and do running records with them to see where each of them were at in their individual learning. We did that every day. So I had a lot of experience working with all the students. I worked with every group and figuring out where they were specifically. And then also finding ways to, when we aren't working with them, keeping them engaged in their learning. I think data is really important in students. So when they're able to see their data and see their improvements, they're able to kind of have a lot of power in their learning. I was in a first grade classroom, and I learned so much about when they can see their improvements, small improvements in their learning, it keeps them going and it keeps them really motivated. And then in math, we also did math groups. So each center, they had a binder that had their needs and what they need to be working on, and just having them be empowered in their learning and know that they have a say in what they're learning as well. So I think that's really important, as making sure that each student is being reached at their level.
Your math groups, did you do daily 3 math? Did you? Yeah. See, there you go. An administrator that knows something about teaching, huh? That's kind of wild. I'll come back to something else you said when we get everybody together. So your assessments, no, I guess I'm going to go back to it right now. You mentioned running records. That's a beautiful thing to always include in an interview. Always make sure you get that in there, because that is, to me, that's a very valuable piece of an assessment. So talk to me a little bit more about the types of assessments that you did to determine how well the students were doing.
Yeah, so running records were obviously really important, because I could sit down, and I think I learned so much through that, seeing like, okay, they're not doing this, they get stuck on, these sort of words, and figuring out what I can do to help them. It really gets you to the root of the problem. And then in math, we did a thing called Math Genius. It's an assessment we did every week. It was consistent, and so with that consistent assessment, adding in standards that they may or may not have learned yet, and seeing their improvement in that and keeping that data so they can see it. That assessment was really helpful, because you can make your groups based on that. You know what to teach the next day and where to go the next week, what needs worked on and what is, sorry about that.
You don't have a secretary reminding you to turn down your phone.
Right, I know, I need one of those.
Yeah.
It was my brother's school iPad. Um, but yeah, I think that those assessments are really important because it instructionally, that's what drives your instruction is seeing where they are, what they're struggling with. You can keep obviously adding the standards as they need to be taught, but going back to standards with certain students, you learn a lot from that data. So that's really important, those assessments.
Okay, so you learn. How and when do you apply?
Do I apply the data that I learn from?
Yeah, yeah. How are you doing that if you're busy with your reading groups and your math groups? How are you getting that in for those particular students that may be excelling or those students that need some remediation?
Right. So I think with those binders or those spots where those students can see their own data and see what standards they actually saw the standards and they got to see, okay, this standard I didn't get last week on Math Genius. And so they have a station, having a place where all the standard, like certain activities for that standard is, so that they can say, okay, so I know I need to work on this and go find activities for that. That way, while I'm working with small groups and can be working one-on-one or in small groups with students who need to work on a certain content area, I can I can be confident that they know where to go to find the activities and the things they need to be working on their learning and where they should be at.
I'm just trying to visualize this. So you set this up as a center or a series of opportunities within a center.
Right, yes. So during one of the daily threes, having an option for centers that they know this is for fractions, this is for working on my addition facts, and knowing that, oh, I didn't get this question right on math or my last assessment. So being able to go to that and just say, I know where to go to find what I need for my learning.
Okay, so child didn't get it on Tuesday, didn't get it on Wednesday. It's now Thursday. What are you doing?
That's when I would definitely be pulling one-on-one and making sure that I reteach or not reteach as much as go through it and more in depth and showing them. I think manipulatives are really great for that purpose. And just figuring out, where their head is at in that, what they're doing wrong. I think that's best to do one-on-one or in small groups to see what they're doing and what we can do to get that solved.
Okay. Technology. What skills do you have as far as computer skills, other sorts of technology, and also what software do you find useful?
Yeah, so I have been using Microsoft, so Microsoft Office, all of those tools since I was in high school. I use several different researching tools through apps on iPads with my students during student teaching. I did a lot of research on that. My mom's actually the instructional coach for technology in Northern Wales, so she's been a big help with that. But I think I've really learned a lot on how to like virtual field trips we've used, um, PowerPoints. We've used all of that, especially during e-learning. So that's been really helpful. Um,
Which program are you using for virtual field trips? Are you using Google or are you using Osmos or what are you using for that type of
we've used Google, so giving them links to those specific places. We did a zoo field trip where they could get in and see different exhibits and watch the animals live, and that was really cool. That was a really helpful tool since we weren't able to go to the zoo together. Yeah, virtual field trips, Office 365, Word, PowerPoint. I've used a lot of those through not only e-learning, but also when I was in the classroom. So that was really helpful for instruction.
Okay, so let's say you're doing a field trip. What introductory or follow-up activities do you have going on for that field trip?
I think that,
before and after.
yeah, so I think that obviously before a field trip, you would want to give them like some background knowledge and so whatever standards you're going to tie in with that field trip. So making, if it's environments, maybe it's where the animals live, a little bit about the animals. So giving them some background knowledge on that. And then afterwards, I think it's would be really fun to have them do some sort of activity about what they learned. So whether it's some sort of presentation or writing, or maybe they put together something, a poster about what they learned. That way they can really choose what they found interesting and go show everyone what they learned.
Okay, thank you. Classroom management, that's next. Tell me a little bit about your style, how you may do it within that classroom. I think I remember vaguely, Mrs. Tiemann used to tell me about what the plan was for ASEAN, and it's not similar for what we do here necessarily, but tell me about it.
Yeah, so I think that as far as handling classroom management, you really want to have a good classroom environment in general. So making sure that the students are very well aware that it's a learning environment and that we all want to be respectful. I think people are really surprised sometimes when they go into a classroom and they see that kids really do want to learn and they want to help each other learn. So having an environment like that, forming really good relationships with students. I think that a lot of issues can be resolved by stopping them before they happen. So when you really know a student, I think you can see that, see what situations might cause issues and be able to stop that ahead of time, especially when you're working with like special needs students and stuff. When you really know your students and you have that good, strong relationship, being able to talk to them and then feel comfortable telling you, what's going on, get to the root of the problem. Yeah, making sure that everyone knows that it's a learning environment and we all want to work together to learn.
How do you keep track of everything? Let's say over a weekly period or a monthly period. How are you keeping track of how the kids are demonstrating good behaviors, good self-control, some things like that?
Yeah, so I think, motivating them, I want them to feel motivated to do well in the classroom on their own. So definitely having high expectations for the students and making sure that they know what those expectations are. So having them having some sort of code of cooperation that we come up with together and that they all agree on and sign together. Having that as a constant reminder in the classroom of what the expectations are, and just making sure I have high expectations of them, and meeting with them, every week, every once in a while, to see how they think they're doing. I have seen in classrooms with the parking lots where the students can put down what they think is going well, and students really enjoy doing that. So I think, having them take ownership of the classroom as well is important.
Let me repeat it for you. You set some kind of goals at the beginning of the year, or they do with you. And then during the course of the year, how are you monitoring that success? Do you have some teachers do clipping up and down and colors, and some teachers do money that you can add and remove into little pockets. Do you do anything like that?
Yeah, so I think making sure that I give them some sort of positive reinforcement. So making sure whether it is a clip up, clip down chart or the money, I've seen it done both ways, and I think that I would personally probably use if I was going to have that a clip up, clip down chart. That way they can see a visual of how they're doing, and then also just meeting in with them, and if they're having trouble or they're struggling to keep meeting up with them about that.
When you're planning, what is it that you take into consideration?
So I would use that data that I am constantly keeping track of and making note of, and I would start there. What do they need to know, and what do they already know? So I think at the beginning of the year, obviously, it's with a lot of different pre-assessments to see where they're at as students. But then as we keep going, keeping track of that data and looking at that, and then I always think that it's important to have some sort of, like 3 steps, having your direct instruction. And so you're teaching them directly, and then having some sort of group instruction where we do it together, we practice, and then having that practice afterwards, and then continuing with that practice as we go to make sure that we'll stick with them.
We'll do two more questions, and so we're going to go a little bit over the planned time. Uh, what do you think is the role of a principal with his teachers, and what do you think the role of the teachers are with the principal?
So I think that principals, should have high expectations for their teachers and to make sure that they're following through with that. So, making sure that they meet in with the teachers and ensure that they know what is expected of them, and then also that the teachers keeping up with, the meetings and making sure that they are up to date on what's going on in the school. Um, I think it's really important that there's a good relationship between the principal and the teachers, and that high expectations are set for both of them, and teachers should have high expectations of themselves as well. So yeah, just good communication and making sure that everyone is on the same page.
Last one. I'm looking for a teacher that will really impact my school. What could you bring to the table to make my school a better place?
Yeah, I think that the relationships that I'm able and that I work really hard to form with the students, um, and having those long-term impacts. So I want to be that teacher that students 20 years down the road remember, even if it's a first grade teacher. I want to be that teacher that students remember and can go back to. And I want, my colleagues to be able to come to me with any sort of concerns or wanting advice. I want to be that resource for people, for teachers and for students, that people feel like they can come to and talk to about anyone. And I think because I'm able to form those relationships, I think that's a really positive thing to bring to any school, is just um, that ability to make relationships with anyone.
Yeah, this was an abbreviated interview. Principal usually asks at the very end, or somebody would, what questions do you have of us? So any questions that you have?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I did look at your website before I got on to look at your,
That's on my bullets that Dr. Oliver mentioned.
yeah,
One of
yeah.
those things you
I
should
looked on
do.
there to see kind of what your school believes in, and so yeah, I think it's awesome what you have on there and what you guys believe in.
Right? I guess that's that. I guess we finished that section there with the interviews. Uh, Feedback. Let me give you some feedback. First of all, you did a really, really nice job with the eye contact as best you can in this situation. Your responses were succinct. You did not ramble. You got your point across. I understood it. If I didn't, I was following up with another kind of a question. At the very end, and I don't know if this is feedback about the interview itself or if it's pieces of advice, you mentioned making connections. This guy here thinks that that is the most important thing you can do as a teacher. And so this is just, I don't know whether you've already interviewed someplace else or not, but if you have that opportunity, please make sure that you're emphasizing how important it is to make connections with peers, that team collegiality piece, and most importantly with the kids. Parents will love you if you make those connections with the kids. That's all they care about. And so that's really, really important that way. See, what else can I share with that I noticed? You did a nice job. You did a nice job. I was very impressed.
Thank
I
you.
probably had some more follow-ups that I would have done, or digging in a little bit deeper, but I know we don't have the time necessarily for all of that.
Yeah.
I guess that's that. I can't think of anything else. So Dr. Parnan or Dr. Oliver, if you have something you want to do or whatever comes next, Ms. Garver, anything?
Absolutely. We have the interviewing tips that will be available for everyone to look at. And we are now able to have anyone open to the floor to ask any questions. So you can type them either in the chat, or you may the hand to raise your hand, or you can just unmute your mic and ask your question.
I want to add that I've been doing this a long time, and so when I make references to some things that I think were good, they may have been good back 30 years ago as well. One of the things when Allison was talking, I wrote down on the side here, Harry Wong, First Days of School. It's a good resource for any new teacher, even though it's an old, I mean, it's got to be 20 years, at least 20 years old by now, probably closer to 40. But yeah, it's a good resource to have.
I'll look it up.
Yep.
And thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot, was it? You did a nice job. Like I said, if I'd had a chance to ask maybe more questions, I might have expounded a little bit more on some things, but you did a good job.
Thank you.
Dr. Bakel, I have your interviewing tips. It should be up on the screen. I didn't know if you wanted to make any comments on that while people are thinking about questions they may have for you about the process.
I would love to do that. You have control of that. So in this situation here, one of the first things I mentioned had to do with the whole eye contact and the way that we had this interview today. I think it's important. Allison, please tell me you're using an iPad or a laptop instead of an iPad.
I'm using a laptop.
Good. And the reason I say that, for anyone that if you're stuck in this type of situation, you'll notice that it's pretty difficult with an iPad to truly look at the camera itself, where with a laptop, that's center top. And so where there's that camera, it's not that side view thing like I'm doing right here that you see. And I think that that's kind of important. This next one is one of the biggest ones. If you are a social media person, whether you're TikToking or you're old enough to do Facebook or you're Twittering like my boys do, for goodness sakes, you better be scrutinizing exactly what you have on there, because I guarantee you, every principal and probably a lot of the team members will be looking at your social media well before you even get a phone call or a contact about an interview. It ranges, and then the next thing I have down has to do with interview size. I always do this as a team. I know that there are some principals that will just kind of do kind of what we did just here, one-on-one, but the trick with that is to make sure that you somehow address every team member, whether it's an acknowledgement of as far as just shaking your head when they ask a question or smiling at them and doing those type of things. That kind of ties into the next one. The relaxing part, Allison, you did great. But I've seen students who are just nervous Nellies, and I totally get it, especially if you have 6 other people around a table and we put a sign on the chair that says hot seat just to make you a little bit more nervous. But try to relax as best you can. Make sure, hate to say this sounds kind of gender biased, but the ladies do a pretty good job of dressing for the job. And I've seen a couple guys that come in jeans, and I'm thinking, well, if you're not taking it any more seriously than that, you probably should do that.
Mr. Bagel, is it okay if I interject just for a minute? We had a question. So the question was, what do you look for on a resume? And is there anything that you feel like really needs to be included in your resume?
That's a good question. Let's look at Allison's. I think it's what needs to be excluded from a resume more than anything else. I'm really curious in your educational and your experience backgrounds. I expect it to be a one-pager. I expect to see what kind of leadership roles you've taken, accomplishments you've received, whether you've been on the dean's list for all 4 years, those types of things. Even though I will tell you, this is going to probably shoot Dr. Parnan in the foot. Grades are not the only thing that determine a candidate and getting a job. It has to do a lot more with if I can glean something as far as who you are in your interrelations with people. And the resume should be able to kind of give me a little bit of that. It's really a big part of the intent is for me to ask some questions, to find out a little bit deeper, just that type of thing. So I'd be looking at work experience, education, and awards.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that feedback. I don't know if you want to continue on your list, or if anybody else has any questions, you may unmute your mic and ask a question, or ask it in the chat as well.
I'll talk until you interrupt me, okay?
Okay.
All right. Allison did the right thing when she made the comment about, I looked at your school online. That has got to be like one of the smartest things you do out of the bunch. And here's why. First of all, we're all proud of our school. I don't care which school you're in, you're proud of your school. And you don't take pride just with school, but students and about your teaching. And so you want to make those people feel that you're acknowledging all the time and energy and effort and passion that they have in their profession. And so it's always really good to not only find out, okay, what programs are you using? You know, I took the shot in the dark with Allison about Daily 3 with math because it sounded familiar, and obviously we must do that. So the similarities of the commonalities that you get, sometimes there you can make a connection that way. So it's pretty good to get that research so you know, hey, they're doing running records and we do running records, or we do Daily 5 and they do Daily 5, or whatever those items might be, so that you have connections that you can make with the individuals as you're doing your interview. And yeah, I guess that's what that's all about. So do your research. Be prepared to ask questions. Probably most often it's at the end of the interview, but never be afraid to kind of say, okay, I've got a question about that. How do you do? And the other part of that is make sure that you're not saying, well, we do, because nobody wants, because then it sounds like you have like a loyalty to wherever you did your student teaching, those types of things, when what you really want to do is you want them to embrace you. So you can ask questions to get a little bit more in depth, so you can, again, try to make those connections. And then I listed some qualities that I think are important. And to me, again, number one is making connections with kids. There's nothing more important as an educator than making those connections with the kids. And that's really, Anna can tell you this because she's student taught in this building and her brothers went to school here, and it's truly, that just seems to be, it gets to be part of the climate, or maybe even the culture. Make sure that you're, flexible. That list is there, Dr. Oliver's skimming through. I want people that are willing to learn and willing to grow. And best people to learn from are your peers. A lot better than reading a book. That live experience and asking questions and bouncing things off of them. And then those key professional abilities, that's pretty much, I tried to take one from each of those little pieces right there in my questioning with Allison. No questions, huh? I see Heather Elliott's on here. I'm surprised she wouldn't ask me a question.
She was the one that asked you a question.
Oh, okay.
I did have another question, actually. When we were talking about preparing for the mock interviews and such, Allison had mentioned she had an interview where she was asked specific scenarios with what goes on with children. Is that uncommon in interviews, or does that sometimes come up?
Repeat it again. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. If you're going in an interview, is it uncommon for the interviewer to ask if specific scenarios with students?
No, as a matter of fact, we had time constraints, but I had 17 different specific scenarios that I would have given otherwise.
Wow.
I had 17 on a list, and no, it's a really good. I think, if I had thought about this a little bit longer, I probably should have done a scenario question as well. And usually the typical scenario question that you receive has something to do with angry parents. I mean, that's the most common one that a teacher will actually have to deal with. somebody that's unhappy about something. Angry is kind of an exaggeration, but somebody that's unhappy, how do you diffuse that? How do you make them understand that you're in this for their child's good as well? That type of thing. But yes, a scenario question or 3, not 17, would be really, really good to have in an interview and be prepared for.
What do you look for in the answers to your scenario question? Could you give us an example maybe of one scenario and what you would look for in the answer?
Wait a minute. Let me go find one.
I'm so sorry. And we put you on the spot.
Hide that for a second and see if I can find what I did with it, because I afraid. Okay, Bakel's digging around in this trash because he might have thrown away. Yeah, I thought I could find one for you.
Yes, we appreciate questions that you may have.
I could text one to you and you can send it out to everybody. I don't have one printed anymore. It doesn't look like. Oh yes, I'm sorry. I've got it right here. My fault. A parent calls and is unhappy about the amount of homework her son brings home throughout the week. How do you handle the call? So, yeah, go ahead, Allison, please.
Okay. So I actually had a question similar to this. So I would definitely ask the parent if we could speak in person. So if it's a phone call or an email, having them come in, I think that's a way easier way to handle a parent or working with a situation with a parent, and having them, making sure that I would feel like I am doing what I believe is best, but having them tell me, what do you think I could do better? Definitely respecting them and listening to them, and saying how much do you think is a good amount, and what we can do for that. So making sure I'm respectful of them and listening to them, but also being confident that I am doing what I believe is right. But I'm sure that's a very common scenario with parents, is having.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. To add on to that, the one thing you don't want to do, I will say, is try to avoid it being an email response. That's the worst way you can respond, because there's no inflection, intonation, compassion in the voice, any of those things that could be read. You answered it best. They can see your body language. They can feel more calm when they see that, look, there's some sincerity here. What is it that I can do to help? Where with emails, they can be totally misconstrued, and they will interpret their own emotions in that respect. What else? Anything else?
I don't see any more questions at the moment. But I definitely appreciate you, again, taking the time and doing such a wonderful job and giving such great feedback. I think it was really some good information that got out there today.
Good. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
What do you recommend for someone who is interviewing with people that they've known for a long time? So if I interview with...
You mean like you and I have known each other for 2 decades or something like that?
I know. But what would you suggest? Because you know me really well.
Yeah.
If I come to interview, do you have recommendation?
What do I do with people?
Not interview?
No, that wouldn't be the recommendation. That's a tough one. It depends on probably what you perceive your rapport is with that individual. And making sure that you feel comfortable. I guess that's the only thing that would really matter. If it's somebody that you know well, make sure that you're feeling comfortable with them. Quite often, Heather, knowing somebody is an advantage. I would say it is an advantage, not just quite often. I had down there someplace, or at least I thought about writing it. It's not always what you know, but it's who you know, or who you know that knows somebody else. And because there is some familiarity and because there is some knowledge as far as work habits, work understanding or working with kids, those kind of things, there is a bit of a leg up in that situation. You don't mean for it to be, meaning the interviewers, but there's something about comfort level if you know an individual that's interviewing.
Thank you.
Did that help? Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Any more questions in the chat? So I think that kind of
I'll ask
concludes.
him another question.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate you.
She did that when she was a mom here too. She was always asking.
All right. All right. Are there any things that you like look for in teaching candidates, like for example, we just took this PLTW course, which is like a science teaching and scaffolding,
Yeah.
which was awesome. But like, are there anything else like that? Like, I just signed up for a computer class using computers in education, but like, in addition to what we learned in college, like, is there anything else that you would say I really recommend?
Recommending
I
and
look
looking for
forward
two
to.
different things. Let me talk about looking for. Project Lead the Way is very solid, I think. And I guess what I want to say to your question is I'm looking for people who have the confidence to have taken something that they have learned and to excite and I don't want to say train, but excite and introduce those pieces, something like a project Lead the Way, to others to see if that is something that would work well within a school setting, a new school setting. So I'm looking, there was one of the questions, what can you bring to the school? I'm looking for that. And people with those experiences can bring something unique to the school.
Sorry.
I have one.
Fantastic.
Do you
Thank
have any pet peeves during the interview process? Something that the person just shouldn't do that'll really just, I don't know, turn it off to the person?
Yeah, there's probably one for me. And since you're going to have an interview next Thursday, you better pay attention to this one, right? Yeah, there we go. I'm wary of people who say me instead of us or we. And I'll catch that.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because earlier you had said not to say we do specifically.
That kind of we do is a us, them, we do. Well, at my old school, which makes it sound as though, well, this school doesn't match up to my old school, but I guess I'll bless you enough to have an interview at this school instead. You know, if everything's all about, well, at my old school or where I student taught, then interview there and don't mess with coming to some other school. That's where you have to draw that line or be cautious. What I'm referring to here is, there's a line between braggadocious and just stating the facts, and that's what you kind of have to be careful of. Oh yeah, well I do that, and I do this, and I do that. You know, you just have to watch that. Another one, and I don't know whether it is ever gleaned from an interview, and that's leaving an interview with others thinking you have a sense of entitlement. That's a hard one because I'm not quite sure how often I really see that within the interview. It's usually not until after you have the job and you've been around for a couple of years.
Is there anything specific that you should bring to an interview
Yeah, bring a notebook. Bring copies of your resume just in case your the principal's unorganized and doesn't run copies off or doesn't have the secretary run copies off of the resume. And the purpose for the notebook is twofold. And I'll be honest with you, part of that is for you to have questions prepared because you'll get asked that, what questions do you have of us at the very end? And you would have something written down. And the second one is to write down some thoughts and ideas, whether that means you have that time as you write it down to contemplate it, come back to it later on in the interview. It may help you with the next interview. It may trigger some thoughts about, oh, I forgot to say this, but yeah, I do that right here. So a notebook's a really, really good thing to have and to carry with you at all times.
So I have a question again. Sorry, everyone. Sorry. So you had asked in an interview that what was her idea of what a role is for a principal and a teacher, and I'm honestly curious because I have known you for a long time, but I'd like to what are your thoughts behind that? What do you think the role of the principal-teacher relationship should be?
I think the role of the principal is to look out for the teacher. If the principal has to bring the teacher in behind closed doors and say, man, you blew it. What were you thinking? Or how do we make amends with this? Or how do we fix this? Then that's what happens. I think that the role of the teacher is to not challenge the principal, because that sounds aggressive. The role of the teacher is to enlighten the principal on their point of view, but understand that not everything is a matter of discussion. I would like to think that all principals that I know, and I believe this right now, they do not make decisions autonomously. They go around and they ask questions, and they're asking for input and that type of thing because you want that buy-in. So I would like to think that there's a give and take as far as the respect, as far as the principal looking out for the teacher when the bad time comes. When the phone call about the too much homework happens, those kind of things. And the teacher understands that there's a working relationship and a manner of doing it that's important.
I think it's about time that we wrap things up here. We have a second interview going on for the secondary. And so we're going to transition into that one. If anyone would like to join us for the second interview, we'd be absolutely delighted to have you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bakel, for coming. Thank you, Allison, for being our little guinea pig. And thank you to all that came to participate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.